Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
Welcome back to the Law Show here on CIL 650. Alex Stojicevic, Rudy Kischer in studio from MKS Law. Maynard, Kischer, Stojicevic, immigration and citizenship lawyers. We're talking, immigration law and a little politics on the program this morning. And gentlemen, here on CIL just a couple of weeks ago, we had a little poll. It was on the first weekend of the election. And if the election were held today, we asked our listeners, who would you vote for? Well, undecided and the Greens tied at 10%. The Liberals were in second place. The Conservatives were in third, but the front runners were the NDP. And last numbers I saw last night, the front runners still are the NDP. If they get elected, guys, what would the NDP offer Canadians different on the immigration file? What would they do differently?
One of the issues that the NDP, I think, have picked on clearly and tried to differentiate themselves from the Conservative government is the temporary foreign worker program. So that's the program in which employers are allowed to bring in foreign workers to fill what they consider a labor shortage.
Right.
And the NDP, when you consider its base of unions, the unions traditionally, and if you take a look at the federal court cases that we've seen about the labor market impact assessment program, have contested a lot of these labor market opinions that have been issued, saying that, we're bringing in cheap labor here. That's number one. It's unsafe, and these jobs have not been offered to Canadians. So the NDP says we're gonna tighten up that program a lot, right? And I can read you a quote here from Ginny Sims from North Delta, the NDP critic. The NDP immigration critic, she says, instead of treating the immigration system as a source of cheap labor, the Conservatives must implement an immigration plan that will strengthen our country and our economy. And Sims says we need to see a real plan to reunite families with their loved ones. Once again, bringing back this, families build communities and are the backbone of our country. So saying, listen, we're going to close the foreign worker program, number one, or shut it down severely. Number two, families are going to be a priority. And number three, that they also talk about refugees, that, really Canada, because of the changes under the Conservative government, Canada has lost, instead of being a leader in terms of refugee, assistance and humanitarian aid, that we've really lost our sort of, world standing in that. And because of the Conservative changes in terms of sort of limiting family members that can come and tightening up the program, they say that they would allow more refugees in and, increase the number coming from Syria. That's which you see the response to that from Harper recently, in which he said, this week, or it was yesterday, we're going to allow 10,000 more in.
Alex, if the number that the Conservatives were looking at was 70-30 in terms of the ratio of economic class versus family class immigrants, what would the ratio be under an NDP government?
Well, I think they would try to move it closer to the 50-50 mix.
Okay.
That's
was that where it once was?
Long time ago, yes. I mean, certainly under the Liberals, the goal was more of a 60-40 mix, since I would say the late 1990s into the time that Paul Martin was Prime Minister and the immigration ministers were Joel Volpe or Judy Segro or Denis Coderre.
Mm-hmm.
So that was closer to where the Liberals was a 60-40 number. What's telling about both parties also, both the Liberals and the NDP have made pledges to throw more money back into the system. So one of the NDP pledges, for example, is a national daycare program, and that's to deal with indirectly with an immigration problem, and that's the live-in caregiver problem.
Right, of course.
Right? You have huge live-in caregiver backlogs. You have a tightening now of that program. So that's something the NDP is doing. On the Liberal side, what they've talked about is throwing $200 million back into the national program to fund English as a second language education across Canada. A lot of the Tory changes have resulted in language testing. Rudy talked earlier about citizenship. While the government has at the same time made it so that you need to have a third-party language provider prove that, credit
you're
you
proficient.
that you're proficient in English.
Right.
They've also cut ESL funding across Canada, and they've taken money out of the system when at the same time creating a demand for it. So one of the platforms both parties have talked about, both the Liberals and NDP, are putting money back into the system to deal with this. So again, if your voter is out there talking with his candidates,
and this is where we're looking for you for some guidance to both of you.
You can
sample questions
they can
for
say,
candidates.
What are you? We like the idea maybe that you've made language testing a requirement for citizenship, but what are you doing about language instruction for newcomers? It would seem to me that there should be more for that, not for less.
Rudy, any sample questions you would stand up at an all-candidates meeting and level at those people at the table?
I think I'd like to know the question that doesn't get asked, what's the number? Like, and why are we going to ever examine that number in terms of the number of immigrants coming in?
The
right?
number as
the
in
number.
what, annual quota?
Annual quota. We let in somewhere 250, 260. We've seen the Conservatives that used to be, on the shorter end of that stick in terms of sort of saying, listen, we don't need that many immigrants. They've now sort of, come around to the 250, and we're not going to adjust that number. No one's saying go higher. Everybody wants, they want to sort of satisfy the family class, which means you need more numbers. You're going to keep the economic immigrants. Are we going to adjust that number, the amount of people coming in? No one's talking about that. I'd like to see that question out there.
There's a lot of dishonesty with that. Over the years, 250,000 sounds like a lot, but we're a population of 35 million.
That's right.
In 1905, I think we let in 250,000 people, back when we had 7 million people.
Right.
If immigration is so good for the economy, why are we talking about fewer immigrants over time and not more immigrants over time?
Got to leave it there, guys. Unfortunately, I'm fresh out of time, but some really good questions, and I'm glad you saved them for the end, because they'll be freshest in our memories when we have these opportunities that more voters hopefully will take this time, given the length of the campaign, if nothing else, to actually have a chat with the people who want your vote and who want to spend your tax money. Alex Stojicevic, Rudy Kischer from MKS Law. Online, by the way, at vancouverlaw.ca and downtown at 1168 Hamilton Street. Good to see both of you. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks, Sterling.
Thank you, Sterling.
Red Robinson and the Diner are next.